This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 2019 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2019. We look at the case for putting Disturbed into next year's class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, plus our Spotlight Hall isn't a hall per se, it's the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in Washington, D.C. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. The year was 2019. In music, the R. Kelly documentary, Surviving R. Kelly, helped to bring sex abuse charges against the singer. The Michael Jackson documentary Leaving Neverland created a firestorm of backlash against the late singer, causing radio stations to drop his songs, only to put them back on the air a few months after the documentary aired, because cancel culture has a very short shelf life and attention span sometimes. Singer and actor Jussie Smollett reported that he was attacked by two men who hurled racial epithets against him in Chicago, Illinois. Chicago police later figured out that Jussie's report was, well, to be nice about it, false. A report in the New York Times magazine finally revealed that a 2008 fire on the Universal Studios backlot in Los Angeles not only destroyed the original Back to the Future's movie sets, but also destroyed a warehouse that held a lot of master copies of famous songs and albums never to be seen or heard again. Music industry records were broken all throughout 2019. Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus's Old Town Road broke the record for longest consecutive streaks at number one on the Billboard singles chart, spending 17 weeks at the top and beating the old record of 16. After first appearing on the charts in 1994 and after a change in Billboard magazine's charts rules allowing Christmas music to be included on the top 100 singles chart, Mariah Carey's modern-day Christmas classic, All I Want for Christmas Is You, finally hit number one on the Billboard singles chart. It broke several records, including the slowest climb to number one with 35 chart weeks, the longest number of years between its debut and hitting number one at 25 years. It also became the last number one song of the 2010s and the first number one song of the 2020s. In doing so, it made Mariah the first artist to have a number one song in 4 separate decades. Bands that formed in 2019 included Everglow, Dice, Sunday Service, Simple Creatures, and Boys World. Bands that either broke up before their inevitable reunions or announced their hiatus included DNCE, Fifth Harmony, One Direction, Fun, The Muffs, Boyzone, Slayer, Spandau Ballet, Prophets of Rage, and Toto. Roxette, Linkin Park, the Cranberries, and the Divinyls all disbanded due to the deaths of their popular lead singers. Bands that reformed in 2019 included Alpha Beat, Bauhaus, Bikini Kill, The Black Crowes, Heart, The Jonas Brothers, Men at Work, My Chemical Romance, Rage Against the Machine, Stereolab, Supergrass, and the Pussycat Dolls. As far as albums went, Taylor Swift's Lover was the biggest selling album of the year. Other big albums came from the A Star Is Born soundtrack, BTS, Harry Styles, Madonna, the Backstreet Boys, the Jonas Brothers, Tool, Post Malone, Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody soundtrack, and the reissue of the Beatles classic Abbey Road. The biggest singles of the year were Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus's Old Town Road, Ariana Grande's Thank You Next, and also her song Seven Rings, Post Malone and Sway Lee's Sunflower, Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello's Señorita, Lizzo's Truth Hurts, Jonas Brothers' Sucker, Halsey's Without Me, Travis Scott's Highest in the Room, Louis Capaldi's Someone You Loved, Selena Gomez's Lose You to Love Me, Post Malone's Circles, and The Weeknd's Heartless. Country music had a major controversy about what exactly was a country music song. Lil Nas X's Old Town Road was originally a #1 song on the country charts until Billboard magazines decided that the country trap song wasn't actually country enough for them. And then Blanco Brown's The Get Up did the exact same thing. The conversation about what type of country was country, or even who was country, usually surrounding the question about whether more black country artists can be successful in country music, continues to this very day. See Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter album as an example. As far as 2019 went, the biggest country music albums included Jason Aldean's 9, Cody Johnson's Ain't Nothing to It, Florida Georgia Line's Can't Say I Ain't Country, Thomas Rhett's Center Point Road, Tyler Childers' Country Squire, Luke Combs' The Prequel, Blake Shelton's Fully Loaded God's Country, George Strait's Honky Tonk Time Machine, Maren Morris's Girl, and the Highway Women's self-titled album. The biggest country music songs included Luke Combs' Beautiful Crazy, Beer Never Broke My Heart, and also his song Even Though I'm Leaving, Blake Shelton's God's Country, Blanco Brown's The Get Up, Marshmello and Kane Brown's A One Thing Right, Morgan Wallen's Whiskey Glasses, Brett Young's Here Tonight, Chris Lane's I Don't Know About You, and Luke Bryan's Knockin' Boots. In hip-hop, the biggest albums of the year were put out by Lil Nas X, Travis Scott, Lizzo, Post Malone, J. Cole, Lil Tecca, Lil Uzi Vert, Blueface, Logic, and Kanye, who put out a gospel hip-hop album, Jesus is King. In singles, Lil Nas X's Old Town Road was one of the biggest songs of the year, with his follow-ups Panini and Futsal Shuffle 2020 going top 5. Post Malone also had a good year with 4 songs that hit the top 3 on the charts: Circles, Sunflower, Wow, and Goodbyes. Other big songs included Travis Scott's Highest in the Room, Lizzo's Truth Hurts and Good as Hell, Cardi B and Bruno Mars's Please Me, J. Cole's Middle Child, and Lil Tecca's Ransom. Dance music was so diverse in 2019 that not one song spent more than 1 week at the top of the Billboard Club Play chart. This was also the last full year of the chart for a couple of years, as the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdowns of entertainment venues meant that there was really no need for the chart for most of 2020 and 2021. After all, no clubs, no club play. Having said that, though, songs by the usual pop and hip-hop dance artists made it all the way to the top, like Jennifer Lopez, Katy Perry, Ariana Grande, and Ava Max. Some were a little head-scratching, though, like Sting and Mark Ronson. As far as the more quote-unquote legit EDM artists went, some of the most popular songs included Chris Lake's Stay With Me, Peggy Gou's Starry Night, Sophie Tucker and Ju's Me Rumba, Fisher's You Little Beauty, and Major Laser's Can't Take It With You. The top 10 DJs on DJ Mag's Top 100 DJs lists included Dimitri Vegas and Like Mike, Martin Garrix, David Guetta, Armin van Buuren, Marshmello, Don Diablo, Oliver Heldens, Tiesto, Afrojack, and Steve Aoki. The biggest Latin artist of 2019 was Bad Bunny. Other big Latin artists were Ozuna, Anuel AA, J Balvin, Luis Fonsi, Aventura, Sech, Farruko, Daddy Yankee, Pedro Capo, Romeo Santos, Jay Cortez, and Taney. Musical movies that opened in 2019 included Rocket Man, Wild Rose, Yellow Rose, the live-action version of Disney's Aladdin, Frozen 2, the CGI version of Disney's The Lion King, Yesterday, Blinded by the Light, Judy, and Cats, which that last one was pretty much universally panned, even though it did have Taylor Swift in it. Musicals or revivals of musicals that opened in 2019 included Hades Town, Tina, the Tina Turner musical, Tootsie, Moulin Rouge, Kiss Me Kate, Beetlejuice, and Oklahoma. Major musical deaths in 2019 included Eddie Money, James Ingram, Keith Flint of The Prodigy, Doris Day, Chuck Barksdale of the Dells, Leon Redbone, Rick Ocasek of the Cars, producer Busby, Peter Tork of the Monkees, Bushwick Bill of the Ghetto Boys, drummer Hal Blaine, Dick Dale, Nipsey Hussle, Juice WRLD, Dr. John, South African musician Johnny Clegg, Marie Fredrickson of Roxette, drummer Ginger Baker, K-pop singer Gu Hara, bossa nova singer João Gilberto, Daryl Dragon, the captain in the Captain and Tennille, pianist Andre Previn, opera singer Jesse Norman, Phil McCormick of Molly Hatchet, and Art Neville. In awards for the music of 2019, the year will be remembered as the year of Billie Eilish, who had the second biggest selling album of the year and also broke records all year, becoming the first artist who was born in the 21st century to have a #1 song and a #1 album on the Billboard charts. At the Grammy Awards for the music of 2019, Billie, along with her producer brother Phineas, grabbed the big 4 major awards at the same ceremony. Billie became the first female and the second person to pull off that feat since Christopher Cross did it in 1980. Billie won Album of the Year for When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?, Song and Record of the Year for Bad Guy, and Best New Artist. At the American Music Awards, Taylor Swift won Artist of the Year. At the Billboard Music Awards, Post Malone won Artist of the Year during a ceremony that got pushed until late in 2020 because of the pandemic. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Video of the Year went to Taylor Swift's You Need to Calm Down. Lizzo won Album of the Year for 'Cause I Love You, and Chris Brown and Drake won Best Song for No Guidance at the Soul Train Music Awards. Billie Eilish, Taylor Swift, Shawn Mendes, and Blackpink won the music categories at the People's Choice Awards. At the Eurovision Song Contest, which was held in Tel Aviv, Israel, Dutch entry Duncan Lawrence won with the song Arcade. Garth Brooks won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, and Carrie Underwood won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. Dave won Best British Album for Psychodrama, and Lewis Capaldi won Best Song for Someone You Loved at the Brit Awards. Alicia Cara won Best Album for The Pains of Growing, while Camila Cabello and Shawn Mendes won Best Song for Señorita, and Shawn Mendes won Artist of the Year at the Juno Awards. Dean Lewis won Album of the Year for A Place We Knew, and Guy Sebastian won Single of the Year for Choir at the ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, Hadestown won Best Musical and Oklahoma won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music was won by Ellen Reed for Prism. Musically, at the Academy Awards, Elton John and Bernie Taupin won Best Song for I'm Gonna Love Me Again from Rocket Man, and the movie Joker won Best Original Score. Dave won the Mercury Music Prize for his album Psychodrama. The 2019 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony took place at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York. That year, the hall inducted the Chantel's Maybe, the Champs' Tequila, Barrett Strong's Money, That's All I Want, the Isley Brothers' Twist and Shout, the Shangri-La's Leader of the Pack, and the Shadow of Night's Gloria into the singles category, which seemed to be a relatively short-lived category. In the performers category, the hall inducted Janet Jackson, Stevie Nicks, Radiohead, Roxy Music, The Cure, Def Leppard, and this next group. The group The Zombies were born in the English town of St. Albans. In 1961, keyboardist Rod Argent, bassist Chris White, and drummer Hugh Grundy, all teenagers at the time with a shared passion for rock and roll, formed a group called the Blue Notes. Soon after that, Rod's childhood friend, vocalist Colin Blunstone, joined the group. The final piece of the puzzle arrived in the form of guitarist Paul Atkinson. A guy by the name of Paul Arnold was in for a hot second and then ended up leaving. So, the group's classic lineup solidified itself into lead singer Colin Blunstone, keyboardist and chief songwriter Rod Argent, guitarist Paul Atkinson, bassist Chris White, and drummer Hugh Grundy. Inspired by the British invasion that was led at the time by the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, the Blue Notes honed their craft in local clubs and gigs. They covered popular R&B and rock and roll songs, gradually developing their own sound. A chance encounter with producer Giorgio Gomelski, who had worked with the Yardbirds during that time, proved pivotal to this group's career. Gomelski recognized their potential and got them signed to a record deal with Decca Records in 1964. However, in order to do that, a name change needed to happen. The Blue Notes was deemed unoriginal, leading to the now iconic name, The Zombies. The Zombies' debut single, She's Not There, which was released in 1964, showcased the Zombies' sound. The song blended catchy pop melodies with Argent's keyboard arrangements and Blunstone's vocals. It became a minor hit in the UK, establishing their presence within the very competitive British invasion scene at that point. The band's follow-up single, Tell Her, further solidified their sound. The track showcased Argent's songwriting skills, weaving a bittersweet tale of longing in a tightly constructed pop package that appealed to some people at that point. While the song failed to replicate the success of She's Not There, it cemented the Zombies' reputation as a band that was capable of crafting sophisticated pop music with emotional depth to it. The debut album, simply titled The Zombies, was released in 1965. It reflected the band's exploration of different styles at the time, ranging from the garage rock stomp of Gotta Get a Hold of Myself to the more bluesy ballad of This Could Be the Day. However, the album's true highlight was She's Leaving Home, a melancholic song co-written by Argent and White, which hinted at the band's love affair with Baroque pop arrangements. The song's complex structure with strings and horn sections showcased their willingness to experiment beyond the traditional pop instrumentation at that time. The Zombies' commercial breakthrough arrived in 1965 with the release of the single Time of the Season. The song, a blend of pop accessibility and Baroque flourishes, became their biggest hit of all time. Argent's hypnotic melodies, Blunstone's vocals, and harpsichord and oboe arrangements created a sound that was both sophisticated and extremely catchy. Time of the Season reached number 2 on the British charts and broke into the top 40 in America. The success of Time of the Season propelled the Zombies into mainstream success. They embarked on extensive tours, sharing stages with the likes of The Who and the Yardbirds. However, internal tensions always began to surface, as is the case. Argent, the band's main songwriter, wanted to pursue a more progressive musical direction, while the other members preferred to become, more commercially pop, you might say. These creative differences became evident on their second album, Odyssey and Oracle, which was released in 1968. More on those differences in about 30 seconds or so. Considered their magnum opus, the album pushed the boundaries of pop music. Songs like Care of Cell 44 and Rose for Emily showcased Argent's songwriting brilliance, employing complex arrangements and philosophical lyrics. However, the album's Baroque pop aesthetic and introspective nature clashed with the psychedelic rock scene, which was just beginning to percolate at that time, as it was the Summer of Love. This album was recorded right after the group's 1965 album Begin Here and came right after the Zombies signed a new record deal with CBS Records. They started recording Odyssey and Oracle on June 1st, 1967 at Abbey Road Studios in London, England, and finished it on November 7th, 1967. However, When Abbey Road wasn't available in July because someone else had already booked the studio for that month, the band had to switch to Olympic Studios in London and then go back to Abbey Road in August. There were 12 songs on the album, 9 of which were recorded at Abbey Road. They recorded Beechwood Park, Maybe After He's Gone, and I Want Her, She Wants Me at Olympic Studios. The album was produced by The Zombies, engineered by Jeff Emmerich and Peter Vince, and mixed by Rod Argent and Chris White. The Zombies weren't given a lot of money to record the album, so they had to work fast because even in those days, studio time was expensive and Abbey Road was really expensive. The album was recorded on the same Studer 4-track machine that the Beatles used to record Sgt. Pepper on. The album was mixed in mono, but when they handed in the master tape over to the record label, they were in for a shock. The label told them that the album needed to be in stereo. So the band then had to go and remix the album and pay for it out of their own pockets because they had blown what little money they actually got on the rest of the recording budget. Also, because they didn't have the money to fix the problem, there's a misspelling in the album's title due to it being misspelled by Terry Quick, who did the album sleeve artwork. The text on the album sleeve is part of William Shakespeare's play, The Tempest. Back to those creative differences now, because the Zombies also did not get along too well in the recording of this album. In fact, the group got into a lot of fights because of it. For instance, during one heated exchange, songwriter Rod Argent tried to tell singer Colin Blunstone how to sing the song. Here's a pro tip for all you aspiring songwriters out there. Never, ever, ever, ever tell a singer how to sing a song. Colin yelled to Rod that if he wanted it done a certain way, he should just sing the damn song himself. Colin eventually ended up singing the song, but the damage was done as far as the group was concerned. The band wasn't an in-demand touring act during that period, so they broke up after they did one final gig in December of 1967 before Odyssey and Oracle actually came out. Odyssey and Oracle was finally released in the UK on April 19, 1968. While it was released on CBS Records in England, it almost wasn't released in America. CBS Columbia Records legendary boss Clive Davis didn't want to release it, but was finally talked into releasing it in the summer of 1968. CBS staff producer Al Cooper helped to convince him to release the album. It was released in America on Date Records, not exactly CBS Columbia. Date Records was a then unknown junior label of CBS and Columbia's. 3 singles were released in America on the album. Care of Cell 44 in November 67, Time of the Season in March 1968, and Butcher's Tale, Western Front 1914 in June of 1968. The album was critically given a shrug as a basic kind of average album. It only got as high as number 95 on the Billboard Top Albums chart. However, with a lot of stuff these days, as time went on, its trippy British psychedelic nature won people over, and it slowly became a hit. So much so that the record label had replacement band members go on tour to support the album since the original members of the band were already out of their contract and was already off doing other projects. In fact, Rod Argent went and formed his own successful band, Argent, who had the hits Hold Your Head Up, Tragedy, and God Gave Rock and Roll to You. The years following their breakup saw the band's music slowly gain cult status. Time of the Season became a radio staple, finding new life in film soundtracks and commercials for television. DJs and music enthusiasts championed Odyssey and Oracle, recognizing its groundbreaking sound and emotional resonance. Notably, influential artists like the Lemonheads, the Cranberries, and Beck cited the Zombies as a major influence, further solidifying their place in rock history. The 1990s witnessed a resurgence of interest in 1960s British invasion bands, and the original Zombies would eventually reunite a few times, the last time in concert being in 2017. That year, they were nominated for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but didn't get in. This renewed appreciation prompted the surviving members of the Zombies to reunite for sporadic tours and occasional recordings. Notably, bassist Chris White tragically passed away in 2004, but the band continued to perform with Jim Rodford, Rod Argent's cousin, taking over bass duties. The reunion tours brought the Zombies' music to a whole new generation of fans who were captivated by their timeless melodies and introspective lyrics. Additionally, Odyssey and Oracle finally received its due recognition, consistently ranking high among the greatest albums of all time lists by publications like Rolling Stone and NME. The Zombies defied easy characterizations. They weren't as rebellious as, say, The Who or the Rolling Stones, but they didn't really embrace the psychedelic experimentation of Pink Floyd either. Instead, they carved their own niche, crafting pop songs with lyrical vulnerabilities and a touch of Baroque grandeur. Their music resonated with a generation yearning for something more profound than the carefree exuberance of the early 1960s pop. While Time of the Season remains their signature song, the Zombies' discography offers a treasure trove of melodic gems. Tracks like She's Not There showcase their ability to create catchy pop songs with a touch of melancholy. Songs like Tell Her No and A Rose for Emily delve into themes of love, loss, and introspection, revealing the band's emotional depth. The influence of the Zombies extends far beyond the realms of the 60s British invasion bands. Their lyrics and Baroque flourishes resonated with artists across all genres. Alternative rock bands like the Cranberries and the Smashing Pumpkins embraced their emotional vulnerability, while pioneers like My Bloody Valentine incorporated their use of texture and atmosphere. And even pop artists like Regina Spektor and Fiona Apple owe a debt to the Zombies' ability to craft melodic pop with a literary edge, you might say. The Zombies may have enjoyed a fleeting commercial peak, but their legacy has endured for over 5 decades now. Their music continues to inspire and captivate listeners with its timeless melodies, introspective lyrics, and innovative arrangements, especially with the instrumentations. Theirs is a story of artistic integrity, heartbreaking dissolution, and ultimately a well-deserved recognition as one of the most influential bands of their generation. The Zombies' music stands as a testament to the power of melody, vulnerability, and an unwavering pursuit of artistic expression. They were finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019, with Susanna Hoffs of the Bangles presenting them for induction, and with most of the band performing their biggest hits. Chris White, unfortunately, died about 15 years earlier. Presented for induction by Susanna Hoffs of the Bangles, lead singer Colin Blunstone, keyboardist and chief songwriter Rod Argent, guitarist Paul Atkinson, bassist Chris White, and drummer Hugh Grundy. The Zombies, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019, and we will put Odyssey and Oracle onto this week's music playlist along with their other music, the link to which, as always, is in the show notes. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you that there is now a Music History In-Depth podcast where we go more in-depth on a few of the events that happened in music history for that particular week. The Music History In-Depth podcast drops every Tuesday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from, as does our Music History Today podcast, which goes over the daily events in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops daily, including weekends, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to this podcast. We're continuing our look at artists who will be eligible for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the very first time in 2025. This week, our journey takes us to Chicago, Illinois, where these guys first started in 1994 but didn't drop their debut album, The Sickness, until 2000. Yep, feel old, people. Disturbed's first big hit is 25 years old now. So, with all that said, to the tail of the tape we go. Disturbed has released 8 studio albums, 2 live albums, and 1 compilation album. Of those, every one of them has hit the top 30 except for the live albums, which never hit the top 40. Their 2000 debut, The Sickness, hit number 29. Their 2011 compilation, The Lost Children, hit number 13, as did their 2022 studio album, Divisive. 2018 studio album, Evolution, hit number 4, but every other studio album, that's 5 of them, hit number 1 in America. When you hear about how rock music is supposedly dead, by the way, think again. It's not. Disturbed also released 31 singles. Of those, all of them hit the top 40 on the various American charts, with 27 of 31 hitting the top 10 and 12 of those 27 hitting number 1. Aside from the group being a commercial powerhouse with sales of over 17 million albums in America and 50 million worldwide, along with critical success with 2 Grammy nominations, the group took nu metal, mixed it with heavy metal, made it danceable and more melodic, and made it their own. Other artists from across a lot of the genres say that the group inspired them, including Halsey. Plus, their live shows are legendary. So, will that actually get them in on the first ballot next year, 2025? Probably not. Should they get in eventually? Yeah, but it might take a while. Because of their commercial success and influence on a lot of different artists, Disturbed deserves to eventually be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And to prove it, we are going to put some of their music onto this week's podcast playlist as well. The link, as I've said before, is in the show notes. Each week in this spot, we highlight a different musical Hall of Fame or museum, since there's a bunch more than just the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's the Country Music Hall of Fame, for instance, the Blues Hall, the Grammy Museum, among many others. This week, though, we're going to talk about a hall that isn't a hall, per se anyway. However, to me, it's probably the most important. The Library of Congress, aside from being a place in the movie All the President's Men back in the day, is the nation's library. Established in April of 1800, it has more than 38 million books, 14 million photographs, 70 million manuscripts, and 5.5 million maps. From a musical standpoint, it's important for a couple of reasons. The first is that it has over 8 million pieces of sheet music and over 3.5 million recordings. The second and more important reason is what it does with certain recordings. Since the passage of the National Recording Preservation Act of 2000, the library has developed a registry to preserve and protect certain pieces of music and other recordings that are considered historically relevant. That's a pretty high honor, knowing that your song or album is so important to the nation that it needs to be preserved forever. This is a pretty high-class list you're joining here now. Some of these recordings are actually speeches or radio shows from yesteryear. For instance, the earliest recorded version of Abbott and Costello's Who's on First comedy sketch, Orson Welles' War of the Worlds radio broadcast, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech are in the registry, as are the first recordings on cylinders that Thomas Edison used to show off his phonograph at an exhibition. The first official class was in 2002. There were 50 recordings that were declared important. All of the above that I just mentioned were in that very first class. This particular album is quite possibly the most recognizable orchestral motion picture soundtrack of all time. Note that I didn't say best-selling. That honor still goes to The Bodyguard, Saturday Night Fever, and a couple of others. However, once you hear this movie's opening theme, along with a few other pieces of music that have become lexicons of American culture, you know that you have been taken to a galaxy far, far away. On May 25th, 1977, the movie Star Wars opened. Note that I said Star Wars, not Star Wars Episode 4, not Star Wars A New Hope, not Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, just plain old zippity-doo-dah Star Wars, the way it was originally titled, kids, back in the day. Anyway, we could go on and on about the troubles that George Lucas had in making the movie, how 20th Century Fox looked at it as a low-budget throwaway movie, if you can imagine that. How it only opened in 40 movie theaters nationwide on May 25th, 1977. How George almost lost the movie if not for the backing of studio executive Robert Evans. Or how, whether it was done purposely or just simple good old dumb luck, George let the studio take some control of the movie in order to get it made, in exchange for George keeping the copyrights and also the merchandising rights. That last one, by the way, was a brilliant business move that still gets taught in business schools. This isn't a movie podcast, though, so we're going to just talk about the soundtrack. The soundtrack itself wasn't released until June of 1977, a few weeks after the movie came out. No one apparently remembers when exactly in June it came out, so since the world first heard it on May 25th, that's what we're going with, not the June date. Composer John Williams was born in Flushing, Queens, New York on February 8, 1932. By the time he wrote the score for Star Wars, he had already been writing music for film and television for 20 years. He even had a couple of Academy Awards to show for it by then. One for Fiddler on the Roof in 1971, and one for Jaws in 1975. Steven Spielberg, who directed Jaws and was George Lucas's good friend, suggested Williams for Star Wars. Even though Star Wars was a science fiction movie, both George and John decided that a non-futuristic orchestral soundtrack would work best. John borrowed heavily from the styles of Gustav Holst along with Igor Stravinsky, Richard Strauss, among many others. Along with being the composer, John was the music director and orchestra conductor. John was also the orchestrator along with Herbert W. Spencer, Angela Morley, Al Woodbury, and Arthur Morton. Lionel Newman and Jules Chaikin were the music supervisors on the project. John recorded the 800-page film score with 86 members of the London Symphony Orchestra at Anvil Studios in Denham, England. There were 16 recording sessions spread out between March 5th through the 16th of 1977. The first section of the score that was recorded was the Chasm Crossfire on March 5th, and the last piece was the end title on March 16th. There were 219 takes done over the entire sessions. For the record, the main theme that opens all of the Star Wars movies was the fourth piece that was recorded on the very first day. The Cantina Band music was recorded on March 10th, and Darth Vader's theme, the Imperial March, was not recorded because, well, contrary to some people's beliefs, that theme wasn't in the original Star Wars movie. It actually premiered in the sequel, The Empire Strikes Back. Also, the main theme is one of the few songs that you can immediately figure out after only one note. I can name that tune in one note, literally. The original 1977 soundtrack release almost didn't happen. Much like the movie that spawned it, 20th Century Fox didn't believe in the music either, thinking that orchestral soundtracks were a thing of a bygone era, you might say, back then. That all changed when their little throwaway project and tax write-off exploded in the first weekend and became a massive hit in only 40 theaters. The lines for the movie's opening were so long that the studio had to rush copies of the movie to more theaters nationwide, with a lot of theaters having to stay open 24 hours a day for almost a year in order to accommodate all the people who wanted to see it. In my local theater, which was the Showcase Cinemas in West Springfield, Massachusetts, the movie ran on multiple screens for over a year and a half before it finally went to second-run theaters. The movie eventually beat Spielberg's movie Jaws for the biggest movie of all time, until Steven Spielberg took that record back with his movie E.T. Once people started asking about the movie's music, 20th Century Fox then decided to release the soundtrack at some point in June of 1977, and literally no one remembers when in June. When the soundtrack came out, it was a double album and was made for auto-changing record players, which were those record players where you could stack the LPs, and when one side of the first record was finished playing, the needle arm would shift to the far right, the next record would drop down, the needle would reset itself onto the record, and the record would play automatically without you having to get up and change it, or really, let's just be blunt, your kids. That would have been me back in the day, having to change my dad's record for him. Pretty ingenious, really. Therefore, the first LP of the soundtrack has sides 1 and 4, and the second LP has sides 2 and 3. There was 88 minutes of film music, but only 75 minutes of it made the original soundtrack release. The movie's running time, by the way, was 121 minutes, so that just goes to show you just how many minutes of music were literally in that movie. Of course, since then, there have been a bunch of re-releases, special editions, box sets, etc. The soundtrack won many awards, including the Academy Award and the Golden Globe Award for Best Film Score. It also won 3 Grammy Awards and was even nominated for Album of the Year, which is an extreme rarity for an orchestral film score. It inspired a disco song by Domenico Monardo, better known those days as Miko. The disco theme, which combined the movie's main theme with the Cantina Band music, went top 10 on the singles chart. There was also, of course, the famous Bill Murray sketch on Saturday Night Live. Such was the power of Star Wars back then. The success of the original movie revolutionized movies and pop culture. First came the sequels and other sci-fi lookalikes. It helped to get other companies to revisit older sci-fi franchises like Buck Rogers, a Saturday morning movie serial, which was made into a TV series starring Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray. Flash Gordon, another Saturday morning movie serial that was made into a movie that's probably more famous for its soundtrack that was done by the group Queen. And then, of course, there's Star Trek, a mildly popular TV show in the 1960s that ran for 3 seasons before it got canceled, but then found a second life in the 1970s in TV syndication, and then became the movie and TV franchise that it is today. George Lucas's special effects shop, ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, went on to do groundbreaking work that it's still doing to this very day. Star Wars practically invented doing origin stories again after the original stories had already been told by releasing, of course, the prequels. Then there's the way merchandising revolutionized everything, and then Disney buying the franchise and running it into the damn ground. But that's my personal opinion. Quality rather than quantity, Disney. Just saying, I don't need to have Star Wars shoved down my ever-loving throat every single minute of every single day. Anyway, as far as John Williams went, he became the conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra for 14 years. He also worked with Lucas and Spielberg on more projects and won tons of awards for movies like the Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark franchise, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, etc., etc. The Star Wars soundtrack revitalized the orchestral soundtracks. Plus, the original Star Wars soundtrack was voted the greatest American movie soundtrack of all time and was inducted into the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in 2004. The movie and its soundtrack has gone on to inspire countless musicians, scientists, astronauts, computer engineers, writers, actors, directors, and many other professionals. In short, the movie and the soundtrack changed lives forever. Happy real Star Wars Day, people, May 25th. The first time that the general public heard John Williams' iconic film score to the movie Star Wars when the movie opened in 40 movie theaters on May 25th, 1977, with John Williams' iconic score being inducted into the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in 2004. And guess what? We are going to put the entire soundtrack onto this week's podcast playlist just for you to love all over again. The link is in the show notes. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.